First of all, two big apologies. One is I know this lot has been moved, but actually this is related to my second apologies. I'm actually presenting the material which is, I'm already telling you, is not really mine. I was actually asked by Jeff, a colleague of mine who could not come here, to really bring up this topic and to present to you. I will do my best to bring his ideas, but I already change it quite a bit, because instead of just presenting on my own, I actually found that the best way of discussing this type of topics was actually to have Stefano with me to have a bit of an interactive discussions, such that we can really be having a constructive discussion on these topics that are usually very, I mean, maybe not really. People don't really think about those, but it could be very important when we move forward and we want to make open source AI more and more broader with everybody. So where do we go? So what do we actually want to talk about? What we want to talk about is how do we define basically open source AI, all of the efforts that the OSAID did in the last years to really bring up a definition of open source AI, and how this really can be leveraged. I mean, how basically open source projects and models fit inside these frameworks. And this basically needs to cover all type of aspects, to say how you distribute, how you can consume, how you license your models, and all of the ecosystem around. Because also let's maybe bring it up, and here in case I see something wrong, Stefano, feel free to correct me. But I think a good starting point is to realize about where we start from in general, in open source software, which are actually the key 4 principles that were defined quite some time ago, that were pushed very strong also by the open source initiative, in all of the, for example, the licenses that they vet to build by open source licenses, which is the fact that everybody should be able to inspect the code that they run, the application they run. They should be able to change it if they need to redistribute it in any form they like. And did I miss one? I know there are 4. Inspect, change, distribute, and use. Yeah, for sure, use. So how does all of this then eventually translate when we do AI applications, when actually our code is not only code, but it's using models, and what could be, and what are these principles reflecting when on the models themselves? And this was actually raising quite some heavy discussions also within the OCI and how to define all of these topics. And what my colleague Jeff wanted to bring with this talk is a bit to maybe bring to the attention of also to the broader audience what are really the challenges that people face when really even thinking about how do we expand from software to science and AI in this case. And I mean, I'm skipping this one, I think is not too relevant. I mean, in case we go back for context. One of the ideas that Jeff was bringing up is more I think out of the story of Solomon, just as in a nutshell, for who didn't know, the Judgement of Solomon is about 2 moms that claim to be the mother of the same kid, and they actually bring it to Solomon to decide who get the custody of the kid. And then what he's proposing is just to cut it in half and to give each one half. And what happens is that one mom is just okay with it. She will just leave with half of the baby. The other one, that turns out to be the real one, would actually just give away the baby just to make sure it's still intact and can live further. So that was actually the criteria to understand which one was the real one. The real mom, the one that really cares about the baby. And I think here in general, what again, I'm passing a bit the message of Jeff that he wanted to bring with this discussion is how to bring how to bridge all of these maybe really like different point of view about open source AI, and whether we really need to split it, or we can actually try to keep the baby all together and to have like a consensus on what is the good way to move forward. And this actually, it's repeated as a pattern, like splitting, bringing together the ideas in the communities in different challenges. One of them is the licenses challenge. Maybe by already giving it back to you, Stefano, like you maybe want to describe a bit what were actually like the different key points that came to the debate. I hope it's working. I didn't use it before.
I can take the big mic. So what was happening during so the open source initiative started a few years ago, thinking about what the principles of open source mean applied to the context of AI. And what we have really pushed, what we have discovered is that a lot of our members, some members of our communities, were very concerned about the fact that the existing law and regulation around data prevents from the free distribution of content. In other words, assembling large data sets that would be fed into a training machine in order to produce some publicly accessible AI model would encounter in numerous obstacles from the legal perspective and from the technical perspective. And so this whole debate exploded in public in sometimes in vicious ways, and that's where a lot of the points that Jeffrey makes here relate to this kind of public controversy. Now the conversation has much better, calmer tones nowadays, because what the end result of the process that we have taken at OSI has produced a definition of open source AI that works. It's acceptable resonates very well with the regulators, because they understand the limitations of laws, and they see something that is actually reasonable. And to summarize, the definition of open source AI that came out of the process states that you need to have access. Well, first of all, the AI system needs to grant you the freedoms to use, study, modify, and share. That was a very easy conclusion. What you need in order to use, study, modify, and share are the model weights, the parameters, the code that has been used to train the system, the code that has been used to produce the data set, the training set, and the data itself, if you can share it legally. And these requirements are fairly easily understood. Regulators, when we released version 1 at the end of October of the definition, and we said it was going to be a conversation starter. And in fact, the conversation has started. We used the principles written in the definition to engage with the European Commission as they were drafting the policies and rules for general purpose AI. And all of the principles basically are in there. Like a general purpose AI released to the public needs to be transparent, and that means that you need to have access to the list of components that went into the data set. You need to provide ways to understand the biases, which means that you need to have access to basically the code that produced the data set and the training. So there are a lot of very good principles in there that have resonated, and they're working pretty well. So, yeah.
I think at least I can say personally it makes a lot of sense. I think it's actually a good way that we can really see like open source AI moving forward. I think they're like good core principle. We are here in an open source AI conference, right? Where we have it's more software related. We don't really talk maybe about the models in this case. For those, maybe we have NeoRIPS and all of the other conferences. But it's good that we actually start to have this type of frameworks. About like, for example, like what I guess putting it concrete, like into the licensing, it was actually like interesting to bring up like, I mean, here it's called a challenge, but I think it's more like a realization. A bit like, did you realize that most of the models actually publish on Hugging Face? And by the way, there was just a post today, I think, from the CEO of Hugging Face that they reached the 2 billion models or something like that. Most of the models don't have a license there. Or, as we actually see, and that I guess was also like a bit of like not really, well, maybe it was actually a controversial fact, but many models now get licensed as assuming it's like code, like one people end up using like the Apache 2 license that is mostly, I guess, the most common one used. But honestly, the Apache 2 license was actually not designed for models. If does not meet all of the criteria, like of having eventually allowing for the use, for the inspecting, editing, and distributing. So, like here the controversy is also about comparing apple with oranges, which is also the picture there, and what would be the good license that allows to cover all of these point of view, all of these aspects that are different, and honestly for models, compared to source code. And I think Stefano gave already like the list of how this can really be done concretely in the framework that is being put together, like the training code, the weights, that you can use it, you can redistribute all of it, and you know which data was used, and you have at least pointers to the data that was used to train the models, if I didn't miss any of the factors. The other aspects that I think it's interesting, again, I don't really like to call it a challenge, but fine, is open science. And here, honestly, I would even like to talk about it a bit as a different, a bit from another point of view, just to bring up the point is maybe all of this discussion about what is the license to apply to models is actually not that much different from what, at least in the science community, we've been doing all the time when publishing our research papers. Like you always get to a journal, I don't know, I mean, like I did many times, like you always get to the point of like, oh, you need to submit to that nice journal, then you need to sign off all of the rights, all of the copyrights, and you just get a small license back that you can actually use your paper, but everything belongs to the publisher in that case. And this is something that it's being tried and it's being pushed to be broken as a system with the concept of open science, which is actually pushed again by the European Research Council. For example, all of the projects founded by the European Union must fulfill open science, which means actually all of the publications and actually I think even the artifacts related to the publications needs to be available with like permissive licenses that allow to completely inspect and redistribute the content in there.
If I may add?
Sorry?
If I may add. I mean, on this point, this is what probably one of the stickiest point and that of the conversations that we had with some of the commercial vendors of open AI, and IBM one of them, is the difference between open science and open source in general. And applied to the AI, the debate really goes down to requirements for shipping the training code and the code used for building the data set. We had this conversation multiple times with Jeffrey and others that they because the nature of the fast development cycles and very experimental level of developing these large language models inside corporations, a lot of the efforts to train and to build data sets, filter, tokenize, etc., are custom. And the level of reusability of this custom code is extremely low. The cost of making it available in open source communities is also very high. So corporations tend the argument is that corporations will never release that code because it contains either proprietary material, like proprietary knowledge, patents on the setup of a data center for training, for example, or it's irrelevant or a very limited cost. And in fact, this approach, this theory was proven at the beginning of the year when DeepSeek released a lot of code. And when it came to, they had the DeepSeek release week, where every day during a week they were releasing even more code after the initial release in January. They stopped short of releasing their PyTorch modifications because they realized that their patches diverted so much from PyTorch that putting those patches back into shape so that they could be merged or used externally outside of their data centers would make it less valuable. So they stopped and they said, well, rather than do that work, we're going to be working with the PyTorch Foundation to upstream or change or submit pull requests to the newer version, but we're not going to release the old code because it doesn't work anymore.
I mean, actually, that's a very good point. I mean, I went through those flows myself. I know what you mean. So I think in general, these were really like a bit the topics that we wanted to have with this talk, to actually like bring a bit awareness about what is really like, what does it mean to do open source AI, also from really like being able to regulate it and to have the right frameworks in place. I mean, we're just maybe open if you want to like to maybe have some discussion and to really have an open discussion. So if you want to ask like, maybe my opinion is not more that relevant, maybe the one of Stefano is more relevant. For me, I just actually wanted to close it with a small comment and remark that in my opinion, it's something we need to be conscious about is, I mean, open source, at least from, I would say my understanding, maybe I was not actually there when everything was defined, but it took anyway a long process, but it was a process that was actually moving at the speed at which things were actually moving, and everybody was comfortable with that one. Now with AI, I think one of the keywords always used is actually how everything is ultra fast, how everything is changing, and we see that one like basically almost every week there is something new that you need to adapt or so. So I guess in general we just need to be to understand that it's good to put all of the effort to try to like put a nice framework around it. And we just need to be ready to like on the fly adapt it. And I mean, to have a guiding principle that I think this guiding principle should always be with us. And then we really like, we will adopt and hopefully we will see as a community a convergence about how the iterations will go. Yeah. So was this like a topic that you were aware of? What are like the issues behind, like, for example, like bringing, I mean, saying that your model is really like open and how you distribute it. Hopefully you could find some interesting insight. Maybe you have a few pointers of where you can look more.
Any questions, comments?
I have a question, actually.
Okay, go ahead.
Is there a way to track or to see if a model that is named open source models really adhering to the standards? Is there a dashboard or
I can take a question.
something?
There is a slide on the model framework if you want. If that's
No,
what you wanted to say.
It's one of the things I wanted to say.
At least one.
Right. So the question that you need to ask yourself when you take a model and if you want to know if it's open source, you need to answer to yourself. It's your answer. Whether you have the knowledge and the tools that are required for you to effectively study how it's been built, modify it, and give it to others. Do you have the rights, the tools, and the permissions to do that? So that means reading the license and then conditions around it. Like, are you comfortable using a model for which there is basically just the weights and nothing else? It's up to you, honestly, and if you want to take that risk. Well, and it's up to the law downstream. I mean, once the AI Act gets into effect, you will have different obligations to the law, depending on whether it is there are disclosures that are sufficient or not. So the concept of open source AI will evolve. Now, there are a couple of dashboards that EU, the European Open Source AI Index. And this is an effort also from a couple of researchers in the Netherlands, if I remember correctly, to do basically something similar to the MOF, the Model Openness Framework. These are tools that can help you. OSAI.
We can try to search for it live.
It's called osai-index.eu. That one.
That one.
Yep, you had a question.
Many questions, but this was asked a year ago, and there was the discussion that do you treat models as data or code, because there are separate licensing for data, separate for code.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's a
from your perspective.
no, it's a debate that is still ongoing. It may depend on the legislation. It may depend on the evolution of the legal cases in the United States, in Europe, wherever they build up. I mean, to me, it looks like data, but and to some, at least some lawyers in some legislations, they don't even. Sometimes they even question whether data weights parameters can be considered worthy of any exclusive protection. So there is still like a much wider legal debate on that.
And second is for like, there is a lot of push for synthetic data.
Mm-hmm.
Then what kind of license would it be? Because if it's made from-
Amazing question. Because, you know, synthetic data is produced by a machine. The machines cannot own copyright. And then we go down a very legal rabbit hole that I'm not qualified to debate. The only thing that I can say is that it's quite complex, because once we get out of the Berne Convention, a lot of the legislations have different interpretation. Like in continental Europe, there is this concept of database protection, which is similar to copyright, but it's not copyright. And so the structure of the data is protected in Europe. Not necessarily the same in UK, or slightly different interpretation of the same right in the UK. United States doesn't have that. So out of the Berne Convention, you get into shaky grounds.
Yeah. Good. I think that was the time of our session. I know that you actually have to jump to a call, so conscious of time, I let you go.
Thank you very much.
Hope it was an interesting discussion for you.